There is a kind of silence that comes in the middle of the night. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind where you're staring at the ceiling again for the third time, wondering why you're up, wondering why your body, after all these years, can't hold through the night. You make your way to the bathroom. Maybe there's a trickle. Maybe there's nothing at all. But the urge was strong enough to pull you out of bed again. And maybe you tell yourself it's age, or your prostate, or just one of those things that happens when you hit a certain number. But what if I told you gently, as a friend, that it might be something else? Not your age, not your bladder, not even your prostate growing larger, but something much more familiar, private, and never talked about. I'm Dr. Thomas Leighton. I spent over 4 decades listening to men over 60 speak the quiet truths most folks don't ask about, including what happens in the dark when no one else is around. The habits you've carried for decades, the ones you've never thought twice about because they were yours, because they were normal. But sometimes, the most familiar habits are the ones doing the deepest damage, not because they're wrong, but because the body you live in now isn't the same one you had at 30. And this one habit, it might be the reason you're waking up at night. If you're hearing this and something in you says, "That might be me," then just type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Either way, thank you for listening, because this is a message most men never receive. Let me explain. Your prostate, your bladder, and your pelvic nerves, they form a tightly connected system. When one is stressed, the others react. Even the smallest bit of pressure, over time, can create a ripple effect. And for many older men, that ripple starts with how they masturbate. Now, I say this with care. This is not about frequency. It's not about whether you do or don't. It's about how. Because when you sit hunched over on the toilet, or on the edge of a bed, with your abdomen tightened, and your pelvis compressed, you may be putting direct, repeated pressure on the prostate. And the prostate, by design, doesn't like pressure. It sits just beneath the bladder and gently wraps around the urethra. As you age, it becomes more sensitive, not necessarily diseased, just more reactive. So even if you don't feel it right away, this habit, especially done in that seated, compressed position, can lead to something called prostatic microinflammation, a low-grade irritation that doesn't scream, it whispers. It throws off your bladder signaling. It makes your nerves misfire. And suddenly, you're waking up at 2 a.m. with an urge that feels urgent, but your bladder is barely full. I once had a patient, Harold, a quiet, hardworking man, 74 years old, said he was up 3, sometimes 4 times a night. He'd tried cutting back water, bathroom before bed, even pills from his primary doctor. Nothing helped. Then I asked a question most men never hear. How do you spend your quiet time, the private kind? He looked surprised, hesitated, then admitted he'd gotten used to taking care of himself while sitting, late at night, on the toilet, something he'd done for years. No one ever told him it might be a problem. But once we talked through the anatomy and what that pressure does, it all made sense. We made a small change. No more sitting. He tried standing instead, relaxing more, no rush. Within a week, he was waking just once. 2 weeks later, he made it through the night. And here's the part that really struck him. It wasn't just about sleep. He told me, "Doc, I feel more in control. I didn't realize how much I'd given up until I got it back." You see, we don't talk about this as men. Not the bathroom trips, not the quiet frustrations, and certainly not the habits we've relied on since we were young. But here's the honest truth. After 60, the body asks for something different. Not force, not speed, but awareness. Alignment. Less pressure. More presence. Because that seated position, hunched over, may feel safe, but it compresses your pelvic floor, the band of muscles that supports your bladder, prostate, and even your sexual function. That compression creates inflammation, and inflammation disrupts your nerves. When those nerves are irritated, they do what nerves do, they misfire. That's why so many men tell me the same thing. "Doc, it feels urgent, but then barely anything comes out." It's not failure. It's a confused system responding to pressure it was never designed to carry. And the surprising thing? Even if you're standing, even if you're trying to do it differently, the rush, the tension, the tight grip, that too can throw things off. Because the next mistake isn't about posture, it's about pace. Most men, when they touch themselves, do so quickly, urgently, like it's a task to get through. For years, I've asked my patients, how fast do you try to finish? They laugh sometimes, shrug. I just get it done. But that approach, especially in a body over 60, trains your nervous system to treat arousal like an emergency. You tense, you grip hard, you breathe shallow, your pelvic muscles tighten, your bladder gets confused, and then you try to sleep with a nervous system still on alert. That's how the cycle begins. If this is resonating, if you've ever woken up wondering why your body can't make it through the night anymore, I invite you to keep listening. Because in the next chapter, we'll walk through a different way to approach this habit, one that doesn't rob your rest, but supports it, and one that may, in time, help you feel connected to yourself in a way you haven't felt in years. Let's pick up where we left off with a question most men have never been asked. What would it feel like to touch yourself, not out of urgency, but out of respect, not because you're trying to get something over with, but because you're listening to what your body actually needs now? I know, for many men, that idea sounds foreign, maybe even a little uncomfortable. We've been taught, whether by life, work, or the sheer demands of being a man, that pleasure should be quick, discreet, done and forgotten. Especially when you get older and things don't work quite the way they used to. It's easy to fall into a mindset of, just get it over with. But your body isn't a machine. It's a relationship. And at this stage in life, that relationship needs more care, not less. I had a patient, his name was Marvin. He was 68, a former truck driver, raised 3 kids on a modest income, worked hard every day of his life. He came to me not for sexual issues, but because he was waking up 3, sometimes 4 times a night. We ruled out the usual suspects. His labs were steady, his prostate only mildly enlarged. Medications weren't helping. Then we talked about his nightly routine. Turns out, Marvin had gotten into the habit of finishing himself quickly, just before bed, seated, hunched, almost without thinking. It was a release, sure, but not a restful one. I asked him to try something different, not as a prescription, but as an invitation. I said, tonight, don't rush. Stand instead of sit. Breathe slowly. Use less pressure, less grip, less pushing. He looked at me sideways. You serious, Doc? I nodded. Just try it. Not because something's wrong with you, but because your nervous system might need a little help calming down. 7 days later, he came back. Same ball cap, same weathered hands. But something was different. I only got up once last night, he said. And the night before? Not at all. He paused. Never thought something that simple could make that much difference. But that's how the body works, especially after 60. Small adjustments made consistently create real change. Because when you slow down, something powerful happens. Your nervous system stops bracing. The muscles in your pelvic floor, the ones that control your urination and sexual function, begin to relax. Blood flow improves. Nerves fire more accurately. And the false alarms that used to wake you up in the dark, they quiet down. You move from panic into peace. It's not about abstinence. It's not about shame. It's about treating your body the way it's asking to be treated now, with softness, with space, and with a deeper kind of attention. And I've seen this work again and again. Men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, who thought their days of sleeping through the night were over, regain that rhythm, not through medication, but through mindfulness. They start sleeping deeper, feeling calmer, urinating less often, even noticing an improvement in performance because their pelvic region is no longer inflamed, no longer over-tightened, no longer reacting to old habits that no longer serve. And yes, it's emotional, too. I remember one man, 66 years old, told me he cried after trying the slower approach for the first time. I didn't realize, he said, how disconnected I'd become from my own body. Slowing down made me feel alive again. That's not just physical healing, that's human healing. But there's one more question that always comes up. How often should I touch myself? And the honest answer is, it depends. There's no perfect number, no golden rule, but there is a rhythm, and your body knows it if you listen. Too often, and the system stays overstimulated. Too little, and the tissues become stagnant, blood flow reduces, and emotional distance creeps in. The key is to find a pace that feels natural, unforced, and balanced. Here's what I suggest. Start with awareness. Try going a full week using the gentler approach, standing, relaxed, with slow, even breathing and minimal pressure. Observe what changes. Do you wake up less often? Does your bladder feel calmer? Do your thoughts feel less scattered? In 1 week, I've seen men go from waking up 3 times a night to once, or none at all. Not because we gave them a pill, because they finally gave their body what it was asking for. Less force, more flow. A man named Ed comes to mind. He was a retired school principal, 71, widowed, polite to a fault. He told me, "Doc, I've accepted that I'll always get up twice a night." I gently asked about his private habits. He'd been rushing, seated, same routine for years. We made small changes, and just 7 days later, he called. "Doc," he said, laughing, "I slept through the night. First time in 5 years." He wasn't bragging. He was relieved, grateful, a little surprised, and most of all, hopeful. Because when you realize that even a long-standing problem might have a solution, that's when change becomes possible. Not from force, not from fear, from understanding, from wisdom. And maybe that's the most powerful shift of all. Not just changing how you touch your body, but how you think about it. Because this isn't about performance. It's about presence. And presence begins when shame ends. You see, far too many older men carry quiet guilt about touching themselves. Some stop altogether thinking they're too old, or that it doesn't matter. Others keep going, but in secret, fast, disconnected, as if it's something shameful, instead of something natural. And that, to me, is the real loss. Not the sleep, not the strength, but the sense of connection, of dignity, of self-respect. Because you still deserve those things, now more than ever. And when we come back in just a moment, I want to talk with you about something deeper than technique, something many men never think about, but which may be the key to healing more than just your nights. Let's talk now about something I rarely heard spoken aloud in a clinic, but always felt sitting across from a patient. Shame. It's quiet, but it's heavy. And it doesn't always come from something big. Sometimes it builds slowly over time from the way we talk to ourselves when no one's listening. I've seen it on the faces of good men, strong men, men who worked 40 years without complaint, who raised families, paid mortgages, buried friends, survived grief. And yet, when it came to something as human as touching their own body, they shrank inside. Some stopped entirely, thinking, maybe I'm too old. Others kept going, but fast, disconnected, like it was something to rush through and forget. But here's what I want to say clearly without hesitation. You are not broken. Your body still matters. Your pleasure still matters. And your connection to yourself, especially now, in this stage of life, may be more important than ever. Because this isn't about staying young. It's about staying present. You see, when you begin to slow down, when you stop hiding from your own touch and start approaching it with intention, something shifts. You stop treating it like a mechanical task and start recognizing it for what it really is. A way to come home to yourself. And I know that might sound soft, but it's not. It's strength of a different kind. The kind that says, I'm not running anymore. The kind that honors the years you've lived. And the body that's carried you through them. The kind that listens not with judgment, but with care. Because when you stop rushing, when you treat even the smallest rituals with dignity, your body responds. Your nerves calm. Your bladder finds its rhythm again. Your sleep deepens. And maybe if you let yourself, your heart softens too. I once had a patient, Joseph. A widower, quiet man, early 70s. He told me he hadn't touched himself in almost a year. Not because he didn't want to, but because somewhere along the line, he started believing that it didn't belong to him anymore. I felt foolish, he said. Like maybe I missed the window. We sat together in silence for a moment. And then I said, maybe this chapter isn't about what you've lost. Maybe it's about what you still have, and how gently you choose to hold it now. A month later, he came back with tears in his eyes. Doc, I didn't just sleep better. I felt human again. You see, healing doesn't always come from big changes. Sometimes, it comes from returning with care to something you thought you'd left behind. And when that happens, your body starts to trust you again. And so does your mind. And slowly, so do you. Now, if you've made it this far, you might be wondering, what do I actually do next? Let's bring it all together. If you've been waking up once, twice, or more each night to urinate, if you've tried limiting fluids, emptying your bladder before bed, even medications, and still find yourself in the dark, tired and frustrated, it may not be your age. It may not be your prostate. It may be a quiet habit that's been overlooked for decades and one that your body is no longer able to ignore. But that's not bad news. That's an invitation. An invitation to shift, to stand instead of sit, to breathe instead of brace, to touch gently instead of forcefully, to give your pelvic floor, your nerves, and your bladder the space to recover from years of compression, tension, and misfired signals. The research supports this. We know from studies in urology and neuromuscular rehabilitation that inflammation of the pelvic floor and overstimulation of the bladder nerves are two leading causes of nocturia nighttime urination in older men. And these aren't always structural problems. They're often functional, habitual, reversible. And in just 7 days of shifting your routine, men report sleeping deeper, urinating less at night, and feeling calmer in their bodies. But the real change is deeper than that. It's in how you relate to your own body. When you move from urgency to understanding, from shame to self-respect, from hiding to quiet honesty, you begin to remember who you are. Not who you were, who you are. A man with value, a man with dignity, a man still capable of healing. So tonight, I invite you not as your doctor, but as a fellow man to slow down. To take one moment, one habit, and try it with a little more presence, a little more care. See how your body responds. See how you feel in the morning, because your body has not given up on you. And neither have I. If this message helped you even just a little, consider sharing it with a friend, quietly, as men do, not with declarations, but with trust. And if you're ready to make this change, type, "I'm taking it slow" in the comments, not for anyone else. For you, because change doesn't have to be loud to be life-changing. Sometimes, it begins in the quietest moment, with the simplest shift and a choice to listen to what your body's been asking for all along. You deserve peace. You deserve rest. You deserve to feel like yourself again. And it starts with how you treat the man in the mirror tonight.